They are all things that can negatively affect your fertility. If a couple shares a bottle of wine a week, there's like a 27% less chance of pregnancy and live birth than those who didn't.
Think about your future kids.
Yeah. Think about what your future self might say to you. If you definitely know that you want children and you're with that person, don't put it off too long for the perfect moment. In a lower protein and or vegetarian diet, there is a lot more issues with egg quality. Using vitamins and supplements and antioxidants it makes a big difference. So really making sure that you're getting enough protein.
If someone is starting to lose hope and they feel like they've tried everything to boost their fertility, what 3 things would you tell them to do?
Get a second opinion.
When would you say is the best time in terms of age to actually get pregnant?
It's such a difficult one because...
Welcome back to the Chew on This podcast. I am so excited for this topic. I think that this is a topic that a lot of our audience and community are waiting and wanting to learn more about, which is everything to do with fertility and just your hormones and how to achieve happy hormones. And today I have the amazing guest, Belinda Kirkpatrick, who is a nutritionist and naturopath who specialises in women's health and has a passion for just optimizing your fertility.
Yep.
But thank you for joining me, Belinda.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me, what actually got you started and passionate about helping people overcome their fertility issues?
So I was at university. I fell pregnant with my first baby. Surprise, surprise. And so I guess I was learning about nutrition and naturopathy at this time when I was pregnant. So it wasn't so much in like a fertility issue in the lead up to sort of falling pregnant or anything like that. But I guess I was sort of like not practicing on myself at the time, but whatever you're going through, I think is where your interest and kind of like passion starts to kind of skew. So I became super interested in pregnancy health of children, and then ended up doing my sort of practical hours at a naturopathic fertility clinic and just loved it. Helping women and couples achieve their dream of a full-term pregnancy, of a healthy baby, helping to reduce miscarriage, looking into why things are happening. And then, I guess that was sort of 20 years ago. And now a lot of it has also too moved into a large part of what I do is IVF support, egg freezing, improving egg quality. Those are just such big areas at the moment. I think more women are becoming aware of the importance of that. We don't have forever. We need to look after our eggs. So it's just such a rewarding and beautiful sort of area for me anyway, in terms of, helping to make babies. There's some amazing highs and some lows, but it's an amazing, part of the, I guess, world to be in.
What an incredible feeling to help someone make their dream come true of being able to conceive when they have tried for so long, because you'd step in when they're having fertility issues, both male and female.
Absolutely,
which
yes.
I think is really important to note. And you come in and you support them on that journey, and then finally they fall pregnant and they give birth to a healthy baby. To knowing that you're a part of a journey like that is just such a nice feeling. So that's incredible.
It's very special.
How was your pregnancy journey? Just overall, did your own experience play a part in any of this, or talk me through that?
Yeah. So look, yes and no. I think everybody loves the backstory. This happened to me and then I got passionate and kind of whatever. But as I said, my first baby, she was a lovely surprise. So there wasn't any sort of preconception journey there. I was at university, so I was pretty young. So my pregnancies, and then when we decided to have the second, once you're in, you're in. My pregnancies were pretty straightforward, a little bit of nausea. Nothing compared to what a lot of people go through. So I do feel like I was incredibly lucky to be able to kind of, conceive easily and have sort of, super healthy babies and feel pretty good the whole way through. But I'm also aware that doesn't happen for everybody. It's, not necessarily sometimes it is things you're doing and not doing, but a lot of it is, like a bit of luck of the draw. There's underlying stuff going on. And that's a big part of what I do is to really look into what are these underlying drivers. So looking at tests and understanding hormones and immune system and inflammation and blood clotting markers and microbiome. There's just so many areas of our health that need to all come into play to have a happy, healthy, full-term pregnancy.
What has been the most surprising learning throughout your career What is like the one thing that has completely shocked you that has or will cause fertility issues?
Yeah, okay, in terms of fertility issues. I think, look, the way that the immune system can really help or hinder fertility is probably, one of the biggest sort of things. I think one of the sort of more not shocking things is that, I guess in Australia, we don't get miscarriage really looked into until a woman has suffered or a couple has suffered through 3 consecutive losses, which is, 3 too many, in my opinion. So, I definitely get in there early, way before that, as soon as anything's gone wrong, and ideally before they've even tried to conceive, to actually look at all these factors and things that could be kind of going on for them. So I think, though, there's not necessarily one thing, but certainly, we are exposed to, without getting too kooky, lots of chemicals in our environments that really can have this ongoing effect on our hormones. So it's a subtle, sort of, I guess, build up of things that kind of happen. So it's not something that you can very easily, I stopped using, this particular makeup or fake tan or perfume or whatever it is, and everything, is good sort of straight away. But certainly that, I guess, we're really understanding the impact of things in our environment and what that can do to our hormones, which is...
Yeah. It's definitely something that is getting spoken about a lot, about the chemicals in the things that we use every day. Our toothpaste, even talking about fluoride, and what we put on our face through our makeup, deodorants. People are starting to go for natural deodorants. And I look back even 5 years ago, this was not a topic people were discussing, but now it's all over TikTok, all over Instagram. You can download apps where you can scan and it tells you, how harmful the product you're using is, whether you should stay away from it or if it's okay. So it's really great to see there's a lot more education, a lot more people talking about it now.
Yeah, absolutely. 20 years ago, I'd be sort of wrapping things in plastic or Glad wraps. And I was like, what? It's all a bit kind of kooky. Whereas now it's kind of okay, I've heard about this. What are the most important things that I should be looking at, and where do I start?
Yeah, absolutely. So why do you think so many people are having trouble conceiving now?
Look, there's such a big range of factors that influence things. I think we can't, unfortunately, escape from the fact that age is a major factor. We feel young when we're 35, 40, 41, 43, 44. A large majority of my patients are over 40. That's when they're ready to have a baby. Maybe that's when they've met their partner, or maybe they haven't met a partner, but they've decided to do sort of sperm donor, and, they're sort of using their own eggs at that point. So age would have to be the number one factor. Yeah. I think we probably, were designed to have babies in our early 20s. That doesn't suit most people. Most people aren't ready financially, emotionally, absolutely everything. So that is a big one. And so I think what ends up then happening is that we've also then had potentially more time for things to impact our health. So maybe we've been drinking more. We've, had different sort of exposures to different, medicines and chemicals and all sorts of things like that. So that's probably a big one. I mean, obviously you can't reverse age, but luckily there's a lot of research kind of going into things, particularly antioxidants, that can be really helpful in improving our egg and our sperm quality as well. We also know that sperm rates are declining kind of pretty massively.
Wow.
On a really quick downward kind of trajectory compared to what they were 30 or 40 years ago. I think it's almost half or something massive. So, we know that there's that impact there as well. And the male factor does often get overlooked, and fertility often does become very much like a female problem, so it feels. However, we need to look at, both egg and sperm, and then the way that they can come together as well.
Absolutely. I have 2 questions. The first one is just when it comes to just women's health and our timing, what is the optimal age to actually fall pregnant? So you talk about as we get older, that becomes, or age is one of the biggest reasons as to why we're facing fertility issues. when would you say is the best time in terms of age to actually
Oh,
fall pregnant?
it's such a difficult one because the pressure that women go through to be this certain age, to meet Mr. Right, or to, whatever it kind of like is, or, maybe they're in a same-sex relationship and when do they go and do, use donor sperm and things like that. It's so difficult. So, research really says that from around about the age of 35, our fertility and our egg quality does decline. For some people, that might be 43. For some people, that might be 32. So, like all aspects of aging, some people might get wrinkles at 28 and somebody looks like, no wrinkles at 60, for example. So we've all got different sort of like points. So there's not really any one particular set point. We do know, however, though, that after 35 and then particularly after 38, and then again each year it sort of goes down a little bit, there is more risk of chromosomal abnormalities in the embryo. So the risk of miscarriage increases because of that, decrease or that increased rate of chromosomal abnormalities. So there's never a perfect age. It's like this kind of like delicate puzzle that has to kind of be put together for you have to be ready mentally, emotionally,
Absolutely.
financially, either in that relationship or for, single women or same-sex couples when they're going to sort of take that plunge and look into kind of fertility treatments. So there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. However, if you are, say in a committed relationship, either heterosexual or same sex, whatever, it's all the same for those intents and purposes, and you're sort of just putting it off to wait for this perfect moment, then my only advice there would be just don't wait too long. A lot of people say like, yeah, but I'm 38, but I'm like totally not ready yet. There's lots that I want to do and things. And my advice to them is always, say, for example, they're in a relationship, they know they want to have children together, it's been spoken about, maybe they're married or whatever. They're like, no, but like there's lots more that I want to do. Can we get tests done and just see where I'm at? And it's like the test can look perfect or not, and it still could be difficult. So I always say to them, if you definitely know that you want children and you're with that person, don't put it off too long for the perfect moment, because all of my women that I see in clinic who have are like, oh my gosh, why didn't somebody stress to me that if I was in the position, obviously, to be trying earlier, I should have been.
Yeah.
But everyone's not in that position. So, I definitely don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, there's this ticking time bomb. I know they're already feeling like that.
Yeah.
There's lots of women that I've worked with that we've actually done. I actually spoke to somebody yesterday who's just got pregnant on their honeymoon actually, and we've actually been working on egg quality for like a few years before she even entered into that relationship. So she was like, look, I really want to be able to make sure that I'm looking after my egg quality. Maybe time is getting a little bit further on than I thought it was going to be. What can I be doing to kind of help to support my egg quality for when I'm actually in that position to be ready to have a baby? And she said yesterday, she's like, oh my gosh, I was like, wow, you conceived on your honeymoon. That was like amazing, first try. She's like, yeah, I've been working on egg quality for 4 years. And it doesn't always work out that way, right? It totally doesn't. But it just made me realize and just really appreciate that, it's not necessarily that you've been working on it and therefore it's going to happen the first time. That's not necessarily how it works. Maybe she would have been fine doing nothing, right? Yeah. But at the same time, for those women who maybe aren't ready to try, by their mid-30s, they might start just thinking about working with somebody or really working on their health. So when they are ready, they're in the best possible, they've given themselves the best possible chance.
I was going to ask, when do you think people should start focusing on doing things that will improve their egg quality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. Really our egg quality, it's a reflection of lots of things, but it's also like part of it, age aside, the things that we can control is actually a reflection of your whole life. You know what I mean? So not that you're wanting to be thinking about that and worrying about it when you're 26 or something like that, absolutely. But I would say, look, like with everything with your health, when should we start focusing on reducing chronic conditions like, cardiovascular disease or cancer? Or it's like, actually, if you can just be as healthy as possible, then you're going to be already doing like that base is already going to be there.
Yeah.
And when I say as healthy as possible, that doesn't mean that you never drink, you never go out with your friends, you never have a pizza, I'm all for balance. It's just that if what you're doing most of the time can be healthy, mostly whole foods, maybe start to look at some of these products, as you finish off that foundation, maybe you move into more of a natural or a mineral foundation. Just as things finish, slowly start to think, how can I be, doing things that are helping my health?
Yeah.
Maybe you start exercising and things, but these things are not going to be just for fertility. They are also going to be mood, health, weight, energy, and then helping to also to hopefully reduce the risk of chronic diseases. So I think just like being really healthy, but if you start to kind of get to close to around about sort of 35 or so, it might be time to go, right, okay, maybe I'm just going to kind of check in with somebody and just start with like a little bit of sort of egg quality support. You don't want to spend your whole mortgage savings on it. But it just may be that you just start to get a little bit of direction as to some things that you could be doing to help maybe a little bit more specifically.
Absolutely. How much does weight play a role in fertility issues?
Yeah, good question. So certainly we know that people, if they're in that sort of obese BMI, and obviously BMI is not perfect, whatever, it's got its own like limitations, but we do know that that can affect egg quality, can affect implantation. We know that embryos don't like a high glucose environment, so there can be implantation issues with people with insulin resistance or high glucose levels. So there's a couple of, I guess, issues that can kind of happen there. So again, most people aren't choosing to be overweight. Most people would say, I would like to not be overweight. So I guess rather than sort of necessarily focusing on that particularly, oh great, there's that again. I'm waiting to be in the right position, to have a baby, and I'm overweight and my egg quality is going. We definitely don't want you to be stressed about the whole thing. But again, you might sort of just start to go, do you know what? Maybe that is going to impact things. I would really like to see, children in my future. Maybe I'm just going to start to work a little bit more on my diet, start to slowly increase my exercise rather than like, I've got to drop 20 kilos or I'm never going to have a baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you have a really good approach to everything. I think the whole balance is so important, right? So instead of being like, oh my God, I'm throwing everything out in my bathroom. I'm not using any of my makeup ever again. I'm not using my deodorant ever again. Get to the end, see how you can make improvements. And also it's not the end of the world if you go and have alcohol on the weekend. It's about still enjoying life in the process.
Totally.
But making healthier choices whenever you can and for the most part.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, such a great recommendation. So how does nutrition directly impact fertility in both men and women?
Yeah. So nutrition really, is the underpinning of everything. Do you know what I mean? It's a recipe that we've sort of got. It's all the nutrients that we're feeding our body. Luckily, we are incredibly hardy. People can survive and fall pregnant in war zones and famines and, when we have excess nutrients, like, certain countries that maybe are having too many fast foods and, not enough fresh foods and things like that. So like our bodies are actually kind of like incredibly resilient. I wouldn't rely on any of those measures as a strategy. It's just to kind of remind ourselves that it's not just, what we're doing. A lot of us are probably going to be in that top 10% of nutrition worldwide, I guess, and I guess probably most of your listeners are interested in health. And yes, they might have had some chocolate for afternoon tea and too many mugs on the weekend. But, they're probably also people that are having some vegetables, some fruit, some meat, chicken, fish, things like that. So, that sort of thing is really important. The research, though, is basically telling us that, like with feels like pretty much everything, the Mediterranean diet comes out on top for egg quality, for sperm quality, for pregnancy. To be honest, what does it not come out on top for, right? Like it feels like it's everything. And it's important to stress that, unfortunately, it's not the pizza, pasta, and Aperol spritz Mediterranean diet, which is what I was really hoping.
I think that's
when
what
I think
everyone's
Mediterranean diet, I'm
hoping.
like, what do you have when you go to Italy? Okay, well, anyway, so it's not that. It's lots of whole foods, like, vegetables, lots of fruit, fish, legumes, olive oil, fish, meat, chicken, fish.
All of the good
nuts
stuff.
and seeds. Yeah, it's basically like an unprocessed kind of whole foods diet.
So what components of the Mediterranean diet makes it beneficial?
So there was a research sort of study, a big one, that looked at the difference between like what they called like a standard healthy diet and the Mediterranean diet. Pretty much they were basically almost exactly the same, except that the Mediterranean diet had, I want to say copious amounts of olive oil. You're not drinking it, but it had like significantly a lot more olive oil in there than the standard healthy diet. And so it came out massively on top for all of the parameters: egg quality, sperm quality, clinical pregnancy, healthy pregnancy, all that kind of stuff. So we know that actually like the olive oil in there is a big part of it. So doesn't mean that you go crazy and, put olive oil on everything, but certainly making sure that that is the oil of choice, salad dressings or baking and things like that using olive oil. But really it's kind of just getting that like quality proteins with vegetables. When we're looking at research, and a lot of research you've got to realise is based on people doing IVF. I guess that they're easily recruited into research studies because they're in a centre, people know they're trying to conceive, you come and you've said, we've been trying for 2 years, whereas the people that are sort of home and been trying for 6 or 8 months, nobody's recruiting them into a study because nobody knows they're trying to conceive and they haven't hit the sort of thought of them having a problem yet. So that when I refer to studies in IVF, it's basically just because they are a big bulk of those studies.
Yeah.
So what we know is that the Mediterranean diet improving the egg and sperm quality, it's often a big part of it is the protein. So what we know is that protein is one of the major macronutrients for egg quality and fertility. I work with lots of different people around the world, and certainly I see 100% that in a vegetarian, a lower protein and or vegetarian diet, there is a lot more issues with egg quality and they tend to have like loads of vegetables, right? So that part of it's generally kind of pretty good.
Yeah.
So once we then improve protein, the difference, and obviously we're throwing in antioxidants and egg quality things and stuff like that as well, but the difference that they get in the next egg collection as to quality, what fertilizes, and then, what kind of works is like staggering just on that clinical level. So, I would say that even above, just using vitamins and supplements and antioxidants, like makes a big difference. So really making sure when you're trying to conceive or wanting to conceive or having issues that you really are making sure that you're getting enough protein. Most of us don't get enough.
Oh, absolutely. It's something that we speak about all the time, just like your levels of protein and how much you're consuming. Because when you look at just like the everyday person and their food choices, they think they're actually getting an adequate amount of protein and they have, I guess, the way that they perceive what protein is. Like they're like, oh, I've had a handful of nuts, so I've increased my protein.
Yes.
It's like nuts are a fat source. Yes, it has
you have 4 grams of protein.
But that's not a high protein source. And so when they actually become educated on how much protein they're consuming, it's quite shocking.
It's very shocking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And because it is a calculation based on your weight, the more that you weigh, the more that you need.
Yeah.
And so it does often feel like you need a lot more than you can be getting. So somebody even who maybe is having eggs for breakfast, a chicken salad for lunch and a steak for dinner, they're often getting half of what they need, depending on how much they're having and how much they weigh and things like that. So, always go through those kind of calculations with people. I never get them to weigh and measure anything. I'm very anti that as a general rule. But, we sort of work it out so that they do get that protein there. So that's probably a big part of that fertility diet. And I guess with men, it's probably more so the fruits and vegetables, antioxidants, nuts and seeds.
They're getting plenty of protein. They love their meat.
Yeah, they love their protein. Yeah, but it's just not, I mean, it's important for sperm production and sperm quality. Absolutely. You don't want it to be low, but it doesn't need to be as high as for egg quality.
Yeah.
So they tend to kind of really need all those trace nutrients and minerals that we're going to get from broccoli and berries and Brazil nuts and pepitas and almonds and things like that.
Wow. So can improving your nutritional intake reverse fertility issues? And if so, how quickly can one see changes?
Yeah, one salmon dish and you're good. No, I'm joking. No, joking. Sorry.
Wow.
You're like, whoa, wow. Why are there any fertility
nutrition.
issues? Yeah, no. So it's not that quick and simple. That's that was a bad joke. So realistically, I mean, it takes around about 3 months for an egg cell to be matured. So we're born with all of our eggs, but then they go through this 3 to 4 month maturation process. So it's during that maturation process where they become matured, ready to be ovulated, and then hopefully fertilized if you're trying to fall pregnant, where we can really come in with a lot of nutritional support and make that difference. The difference with the sperm cell is that the sperm only takes 3 months to be created and then it's gone. So you get really big leaps and bounds generally when you start working on sperm quality, because the sperm that's there today won't even be there in 3 or 4 months. So when you test it again, if you need to, it's like, they're like, oh my gosh, which is great because it's a little sexist, but generally men like to see the numbers.
Yeah.
So if the sperm analysis doesn't look great, they're generally highly motivated to make that better. And then if they need to get it retested, if their partner's not pregnant by that time, in 3 or 4 months, they're like, whoa. And you really see that massive kind of jump. So certainly depending on what the diet was like prior, you can get big jumps in 3 or 4 months' time. If your diet's already really good, you may be having some dinners out on the weekend and a couple of glasses of wine, and it's not like, but sharing a dessert, and it's not like perfect, but it's not about being perfect. If they're generally getting, pretty good amounts of protein, they're getting vegetables, they're having some fruit, they're drinking water, you're not going to get as much change just with diet. And that's where, sort of therapeutic doses of certain supplements are going to come through.
I'm going to pause you there.
Yes.
I do want to touch on supplements, but not yet.
Okay, yeah. And I think the other important thing to kind of add, not supplement related, is most of my clients, and possibly the people listening to a podcast, I'm guessing, are generally type A. What can I do? Give me the research. Like, let me know what it is that I can do, and I'm going to probably do it. Right?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, like maybe tomorrow. So some people, very much like, right, I'm going to do it all. Fertility is one of those areas of your life that don't come around very often, where it's not necessarily it's not effort reward based really at all. So you're used to studying hard, getting a good mark in the exam, working hard, getting a promotion, saving up, going on a nice holiday. It's all this like, okay, well, if you put in the work, you're going to get the reward. It doesn't always happen quite so perfectly, but it's a general, you don't study, you don't do well on the exam. And we're like, yeah, well, that's why. That's I messed that up.
Yeah.
Right? I deserve that. I didn't do any work, right?
Yeah.
So worked my butt off. Maybe you didn't do perfectly, but like that was as good as I could do. Like I did well, I did better.
Yeah.
With fertility, you can be doing all of these things, right? You can be doing everything perfectly. And a lot of people that I see are like, okay, so I won't drink any alcohol. I won't have any sugar. I won't do any, because it's like if they do it better, they feel like better, then they feel like they're going to get a better result or a faster result because of that. So I do say to them, like, it's one of the first times where like you're having sex at the right time, you're eating well, you're taking your vitamins. Like, well, then why didn't it happen? I don't get it. Like I did all the things that it should be. And I was like, yeah, like now it's just like waiting your turn or working out what else is going on, depending on, how long they've been trying for. So it's really important to, I think, realize that we don't want to completely do nothing as our strategy either. But at the same time, just going, okay, so it's not like I want to, promote my health and be as healthy as possible and give my body the best chance, but also knowing that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be now, or if, how did my friend go out and get drunk and accidentally fell pregnant and whatever. I was like, yeah. Listen, and not to say it's not fair, but it's not necessarily what you've done is what you get or deserve, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I feel like it's something that you just try as hard as you can, and if it happens, it happens, and sometimes it doesn't, which, you then start looking into other reasons and other answers as to why it's not. But putting yourself in the best possible position by making the best possible choices whenever you can is just giving your body the best chance.
Yeah. And one of the big things I do with people is make them a bit of a roadmap. So, they've obviously probably maybe already been trying for a bit before they see me. Then we sort of work out, what we're going to do, what we're testing, how long we're going to then kind of go for before they then consider something else. And then generally nearly is always something else. So, it might be that, one fertility specialist has said this is all we can do. But like, there's lots of different ways of doing things. And so it is really important to remember that, like say, for example, you take the car to the mechanic and they say, oh, you need a whole new engine. And you could be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I do. And that's going to be $5,000. And like, oh, okay. But like it could be that if you went to somebody else, they're like, look, we could actually, oh gosh, I'm totally making this up. We could recondition it by XYZ.
There's
and
a
that's going to
Band-Aid
be
solution or whatever.
Or just even like we could do this other, well, not even a Band-Aid solution. We could actually do this other way that we sometimes do. And that's just a different way of looking at things. But other people might say you just need a new motor. So you're like, oh, there's like different ways of doing things, like a haircut, like a facial, like exercise regime, like weight loss, there's not just one particular way. So just be aware of that, if somebody is saying that to you, that it is worth seeing somebody else and just hearing what different opinions there are.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about alcohol and the role it plays, because you have mentioned it quite a bit. So you talk about if you accidentally have alcohol on the weekend or this. So the word alcohol has been used repetitively.
Okay.
So tell me about the impact of alcohol.
Yeah. So I guess in different countries around the world, so in European countries, for example, there's a bunch of countries that their recommendations, government recommendations, are when you start to try to conceive, both partners should stop drinking altogether, right? I mean, in Australia, I don't know if we're ever going to really fully say that, but that is the recommendation for some, we know that alcohol can affect egg quality and can affect sperm quality. At the same time, though, I see a lot of people that are on a long-term fertility journey. And so, I generally think that for most people, moderate amounts of alcohol are probably going to be fine. When I say probably, I mean, we don't know.
What's moderate? Define moderate.
Great question. So moderate would be, say, for example, 2 to 3 standard drinks a week maximum for a female, and obviously depending on how far they are into their journey and whether they're doing IVF and kind of things as well. And then for men, probably 3 to 4, but standard drinks, most drinks are more than a standard drink. There's research showing that, say, for example, in an IVF cycle, if a couple shares a bottle of wine a week, so what are we talking, 2.5 glasses each, in that process, there's a 27% less chance of pregnancy and live birth than those who didn't.
Wow.
Massive, right? But that's during that IVF cycle as those eggs are kind of being grown. But you're okay, so, what are we taking away from that? So we know that when people, and particularly, as I said, you see it so easily in men because, you can actually test and measure the sperm. With eggs, there's no real way of testing the quality of them until maybe you do IVF, and if things don't look great, everything gets blamed on egg quality, right? It's a very convenient kind of scapegoat. Maybe at some point somebody will be able to just laser look at them and assess them and be oh, actually the egg quality was okay. What are we going to blame now? Yeah. Right? So, with sperm, for example, though, if guys stop drinking, stop vaping, stop taking recreational drugs, stop smoking, improve their diet, you see a massive uptick in that. So, they are all things that can negatively affect your fertility. But we've also got to make sure that, if alcohol is something that you like to do, that, maybe you're having a date night, you have a couple of glasses of wine each or one cocktail, one glass of wine, but you don't just get completely spanked every weekend and you don't need to maybe drink a bottle of wine a night or, it's just you could just drop out some of those more regular habits. But, as I said, I also see people who go, we haven't drank for a year, but it used to be a big part of our social life, so now we're not social. Now we're fighting with each other because we don't have that that not that it's about alcohol, but we've stopped being social because of it. We stopped going out to dinner because of
Doing the things they enjoy.
Right. So there's also always that kind of that balance as to not stopping things that, you enjoyed, but also going, oh, actually we did go out to dinner and we decided not to drink tonight. It was actually kind of fine and fun. Great. Or we just had 1 or 2 and that was fine and we drove and we saved $100 in Ubers and that was kind of really fine as well.
What about past decisions? So I think, as you mentioned prior to getting on this podcast, a lot of women particularly start thinking about fertility in their 30s. Mm-hmm. And, in your 20s, you're out, you're drinking, going out with friends, whatever. You don't really think about the impact it has on your fertility. What about past decisions, in your early 20s? How does that impact fertility?
Look, try not to regret things. Yeah. Yes and no. Try not to regret your past, right? Everybody has a past. Our bodies, as I said before, are incredibly hardy, right? Yeah. Our bodies want to detoxify from things. So it's only when we put a lot of pressure on them that it becomes difficult for them to do that. So if you had a bit of a party past and things like that, you're just do you know what? Just start being healthy. Hopefully you're kind of semi-over it anyway. It just becomes less and less. It used to be every week, then it's every month, and then it's every 3 months, and then it's just for some special occasions, and then it's twice a year. So it generally for most people drops off a bit anyway. You've got to get up and go to work. You're sick of feeling terrible and whatever. So that generally happens. So don't worry about what you've done in the past. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's had a life. Everybody's lived. As I said, it's not fertility isn't a reward or punishment for things that you've done. I've got patients who are literally the most healthy people I've ever met in my life and have been for their whole lives and maybe still don't have a child. I've got people who, have had, been in rehab for drug addictions and things like that, and they fall pregnant the first time, right? So it's not, it's obviously it's very annoying for those very healthy people when they do see that in other people, but it's not, it's never that black and white. So don't worry about what you've done in the past, just kind of be aware of being healthy, as I said, for, your general health and how you feel and your emotional health and your mood and all those sorts of things. But without necessarily, if you're not currently trying, then don't over focus on that. And if you are currently trying, honestly, these people, particularly women, have enough to beat themselves up about, which they shouldn't, but do, rather than worrying about what they did in their 20s.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Because you hear a lot of people say that. They're like, oh, like I'm so worried about what I did in my 20s, or like both men and female, like, oh, I, partied a lot and, now I can't fall pregnant and I'm going to blame that. It is something that people talk about a lot. So
yeah. And look, if you're in your 20s and you're in that era, I definitely think clinically there is a little bit of a correlation with people who are like, oh, we were big partiers, to maybe it being a bit more difficult. But it's just like it's one piece of a very multifactorial puzzle.
Yeah.
So if you're past that era, don't worry about what you've done. If you're in that era, have fun, just tone it down just slightly.
Think about your future kids.
Yeah. Think about what your future self might say to you.
So what are some of the most common myths about diet and fertility?
Yeah, great question. So I think, certainly there's a lot around IVF and implantation and things like that. So there's this myth that like if you go and have like McDonald's chips after you have an embryo transfer, so that's when they put the embryo back in you, that it's going to make it stick more. I can tell you that it's either not going to make any difference at all or not help it to stick, but it's not going to be detrimental, but it's certainly not going to help. The other one too is like pineapple, which is sort of a myth, but not. So there's a compound in pineapples called bromelain that again can help with implantation. Go for it. It's a healthy food. Eat your pineapple. The amount of pineapple that you would have to eat in order to hit that amount of like sort of therapeutic doses of bromelain, I think you'd probably be on the toilet like the whole day and have a stomach ache. So those things, there's probably an element of truth in that, but it's just like, eating a bit of pineapple's not really going to make any difference. So I think there's not ever a particular food that is going to definitely help or definitely hinder. But you do hear some unusual, what people are eating in order to want to have a baby. I'm drinking lots of milk because like that's, my mum said, my grandma said, somebody said that like that's going to like I need to drink lots of milk in order to kind of like be fertile. And you're like, look, lots probably you don't need. But it's not going to make you more fertile or pregnant.
The problem is that when they try and overcompensate or try and have more milk, they then lack all of the other essential nutrients.
Yes.
So like, for example, they might not eat as much protein because they're drinking so much milk or eating so much pineapple or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So it's like if you just keep it very balanced, healthy, eat your protein, eat your veggies, eat your fruits, your nuts, your seeds, your olive oils.
Yes.
Just have a healthy diet.
Yeah,
that's
which is
most
such
important.
a boring little catch cry. Like I get that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's so much more like attractive and like fatty to kind of be like if you eat, pineapple every single morning or broccoli every single night, like you're definitely going to fall pregnant faster. Like you're like, great, excellent. I like a to-do list. I'm going to add that on there. But like you said, people sort of take things always to the extreme.
Yeah.
And it's a bit boring, but like the more variety that you have is actually where you're going to get the most different trace nutrients and minerals, which is going to be better for your gut microbiome as well, which is important for fertility. It's spreading it around is the best.
Absolutely. So let's talk about dietary supplements. You did touch on that. What would you recommend when someone has absolutely exhausted all of like the health aspects? They're super healthy, they're eating well, and they still can't fall pregnant. You did mention that supplementation then has a role in all of this.
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
It's difficult. Obviously we'll go through some things because people want to know, and that's totally fine. But this is where you really do want to step in and actually start working with somebody if you can. The amount of money that you're going to potentially waste on supplements that aren't for you is unbelievable. So people will say like read a book and they've gone onto the internet and they've bought like 6 things or more. They'll come in, I'm like, I'm taking this. I'm like, well, you don't really need that because of this. You don't really need that because of this. And they're like, oh. So it may cost you that initial, like assessment. Doesn't need mean that you need to be going to see that person all the time, but like try to get it tailored for you. Try to also, if you can, get the forms of the supplements that are worthwhile. So in Australia, we've got a very strict what we call TGA or Therapeutic Goods Administration. So it means that all of our practitioner-only products, like, and even some of the over-counter products, like they're all third-party tested. We know what we're getting. But if you go, say, for example, I'm like zinc is really good, particularly for sperm, and you're like, I'm going to go to the pharmacy and get zinc. You're probably going to get zinc oxide, which is really poorly absorbed, whereas you're really wanting a zinc citrate or a zinc picolinate. So you need to make sure that not only you're getting the right thing, it's in the right dose. What you buy off the internet, you might think it's say, for example, CoQ10 or ubiquinol that I'll talk about in a second. But like you don't actually know that it's that when you've bought it off the internet. So you generally get what you pay for with supplements, which is annoying, but you're better off taking less of the right stuff than more of the wrong stuff.
Absolutely.
So what I would say though is it depends again on what's going on. So you need to kind of have that deep dive into, if you're not falling pregnant because, say, for example, your partner's like doesn't have any sperm, right? Which you won't notice because the semen, which is the liquid that the sperm lives in, will still be the same. But if you haven't had a semen analysis, you've been trying for 6-12 months and there's no sperm, then you can take every supplement under the sun. You can't get pregnant because there isn't any sperm in you. If you've got, for example, like a blood clotting issue that you didn't know about, you might end up needing a blood thinner prescribed to you, then taking supplements for egg quality isn't going to help you. So, there's things that we can go through that we'll talk about for some things for like egg quality and some general nutrients, but that's why it's important to not just go and get everything because we need to actually know why.
Absolutely.
Right? Otherwise, you're just barking up the wrong tree. Some people have endometriosis. They might have even what's called endometriitis, which is inflammation in the lining of the uterus. It can be detected via a biopsy. Sometimes they just need a course of antibiotics, and that gets rid of the endometriitis, which was stopping an embryo implanting. So we can work on egg quality and spend thousands of dollars. But, if that's not addressed, it's not going to work, right? So we need to really find out what is going on to then be able to direct it. But certainly we know that everybody needs at least folate and iodine. They're the sort of two, you definitely need those. I would always recommend a good quality prenatal multivitamin. That's just going to cover you with a little bit of everything, nothing of anything. It's not going to make you pregnant. It's basically just meaning that when you do fall pregnant, you're going to have all little bits and pieces there. Probiotics can also be really good. We know that there needs to be a high level of what we call lactobacilli in the uterine environment for healthy implantation. So particularly if you've got any gut issues or history of antibiotic use, a lactobacilli probiotic can be really good. I love fish oils. So fish oil is really good for implantation, egg quality, baby's brain and eye development for when you are wanting to fall pregnant as well. Needing to make sure that your iron's okay, really important for healthy ovulation, but test that before you look at doing it. Vitamin D is really important. Again, a lot of us are low in vitamin D. The range is 50 to 150. You really want that number definitely over 75, ideally over 100 for egg quality. Again, testing it before supplementing it, it might be totally fine. It's also not fine just because you're tanned so like that's a good sign that it's probably okay, but it doesn't mean that you're actually absorbing and it is okay. So vitamin D is really important for fertility. If you are starting to beyond the over 35, 38, 40 side of life and trying, that's when we really want to kind of come in with antioxidants. So things like the three that I would probably say are the biggest ones are ubiquinol, N-acetylcysteine, and activated vitamin B3, which is sometimes known as NAD plus or NR. So they're sort of like, I guess, like a bit of the three that are really helpful for kind of egg quality. But, I guess when we're looking at antioxidants, there's so many, and that's where we need to kind of know what's going on to know which ones to be looking at. Zinc's also really important. If you've been on the contraceptive pill for a while, that tends to decrease zinc levels in the body because it tends to increase copper. So zinc might be something that you're looking at there.
Wow, so much information. I'm just sitting here absorbing it all. That is just like incredible. And what I love is that you're so right. It is such a personalized journey, and that there is no one fits all approach. And what may work for someone is not necessarily going to work for you as well. And it's so important that if you are having fertility issues, speak to someone about it, go and find out what is wrong, because then you're actually prescribed, if you need to be prescribed anything to help with any issue that you're facing that is preventing you from falling pregnant.
Yeah.
So, and that's like the main thing that I got out of all of this. There are things that you can take to improve egg quality, but it may not be.
It might not be the issue.
It might not be the issue.
Yeah. You might have blocked tubes and sperm has never gotten near the eggs, and that either needs to be corrected or you do need to go straight to IVF.
And that's, you know what, and you hear, because I'm in my 30s now, it's what people are talking about where they say, you know, I'm not falling pregnant, it's my egg quality. It's the first thing that they blame.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But look, go and get tested. Go and do whatever you need to do. Speak to the right people and find out what's actually going on so that you are on the path to putting a solution in place to give you the best chance at falling pregnant.
Yeah, and you haven't wasted too much time kind of being, you know, might have already been 6 to 12 months. You're like, okay, that's normal, but now it's not happening. Let's get some things done before you go and invest too much down different rabbit holes.
Yeah.
You know, I see people who've done, you know, a year of acupuncture, a year of high dose supplements, like, you know, and they end up coming and like, I'm like, okay, we need to get a sperm test done. No sperm. You're like, you know, very little, like low levels of sperm, say, for example. It's like the woman's been working on this for 2 years and, you know, the guy hasn't even been involved. And, you know, just because of society, not because he's, you know, not wanting to be involved. It's just like, she's like, maybe my cycle's not perfect. So I was like, oh, it's because I've got a short cycle. Or, you know, so there's always some little side plot that women end up tending to go, that's probably what it is. So I've been working on that for ages. Whereas it's like, okay, like, you know, you've got a 25-day cycle. You thought that was the issue. But actually there's all these other things that needed to kind of be looked at. And often it's not, that wasn't actually the issue at all. So, you know, knowing is, you know, knowledge is power,
Absolutely.
Right? And whether that then means you can do a naturopathic intervention or a medical intervention, I mean, at the end of the day, it's knowing what your options are based on what's going on.
So at what point should someone see someone?
Yeah, good question. So I think if you have the inclination, money and focus to be looking at seeing like a fertility naturopath, you know, before you want to start trying, right? You know, 3 to 6 months before you're like, okay, like you prepare your body, have a look at some of these basic things. I mean, we wouldn't be doing, you know, sort of tube tests or sperm tests at that kind of point unless there was a particular reason to. But, you know, just both getting as healthy as possible, working on your cycle whilst not then on the roller coaster of am I not pregnant this month kind of thing. That's probably optimal. Again, it is expensive. You know, not everybody has access to that or interest in that. So if you like looking at that sort of whole preconception health, that would be the optimal time. Once you then, though, you sort of hit that sort of, you know, 6 months to 1 year, what they tend to say is if you're over 35, go and see a specialist at 6 months. If you're under 35, go and see a specialist after a year. I find it quite strange because the under 35s really should have conceived within the 6 months, not the year, right? And I guess the recommendations are more like, look, they probably will just fall pregnant. Maybe they've timed it wrong and whatever, so they don't really need intervention. But I think we've also got to be, you know, individually, you know, focused. You know, if you're wanting to have a baby at 28, well, you don't want to wait till 30 just because you've got time.
Yeah.
You know, you were trying then. So you're still wanting to be looked at in that sort of 6 to 12 months. So I just sort of always say, like, if nothing's happened by 6 months, you know, go at least see your GP or a naturopath or whoever, get some sort of test done, and then it might be appropriate to move you on to a fertility specialist. That doesn't mean that you're signing up for IVF. It just means that you can get, some doctors are good at getting sperm tests done and, you know, tube flushes and things like that, and others will refer you on. So it's just a good place to get all that workup done. Then if at some point you do need intervention, you've got that there as an option, but you're not signing up for that. It's just more seeing
what's going on.
Yeah, so it's hard because you don't want to sort of over-medicalise it before you have to.
Absolutely.
And remember too, 6 months is 6 like sort of conception attempts.
Yeah.
So if you've got a longer cycle or whatever, you know, it might be that you haven't actually, even in 6 months, you haven't actually hit 6 cycles. It might be that he was traveling that month, you know, you felt sick in that month. You kind of mistimed it that month because your period came early or whatever it was. So you might have only had 3 conception attempts. So even though it's been 6 months, if you've only had 3 months where you went, yep, no, we gave it a red hot go in my fertile window, then you should probably wait a little bit longer. Because people come saying it's been a year. And they're like, oh, we didn't try then, and then he was sick, and
we
then
only
I was
tried
away.
once.
Yeah, like sometimes I'm like, so have you guys tried? We look through the tracker. So have you guys like actually kind of? It looks like it's been like 4 actual months? Like, yeah, probably. And like, it redefines, like, yes, it's been a year, but you know, it's only kind of been 4 cycles. So it is good to sort of, you don't want to over record stuff, but it is kind of good to record when you have been trying.
Yeah.
Because if it happens in a couple of months, you never do anything with that data. And if it does take a year, then at least we can look back and be like, oh my gosh, you actually did try every single month for 12 months. You hit I can see when you've had your period and therefore when you've ovulated, you've tried at the perfect time. Some people come though and I'm like, oh, you're like trying at the wrong time. Like you could almost just go and don't even worry about the appointment. Just go and actually try at the right time, which I'll tell you when that is for 3 months and see what happens.
And then come back if
totally.
it doesn't work.
And then it's like, then come back if it doesn't work. So, yeah.
No, that's great. So to wrap things up, if someone is starting to lose hope and they feel like they've tried everything to boost their fertility, what 3 things would you tell them to do?
Get a second opinion.
Yeah.
Know that there is always something else. You know, and whether that means that you're ending up with donor sperm or donor eggs, which, you know, nobody wants to think that that's what's sort of happening. But once we open our eyes to different options and possibilities, you know, and start to follow different accounts on Instagram or whatever it is and actually just expand our horizon into that, sometimes if it really is the end, that can make it not the end.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Don't just rely on what you've heard from your friend or somebody or the internet or whatever as to how hard or easy or expensive that is. There are so many options that you can kind of be looking at with that. And I guess so like, you know, seeing a different doctor and or naturopath. And sometimes you've got to see a couple, you know, and I guess this is where I guess people understandably don't know. They're like, well, I saw 2 or 3 doctors. And sometimes they'll come and see me. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't know this. You kind of saw people that actually all think and practice the same. So I'm often like, oh my gosh, go and see X person because they do things a bit differently to those 3.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you think you've had a couple of opinions, that's where you almost have to step outside that world and whether it is seeing, you know, whether it's your, you know, acupuncturist or naturopath or whatever who just has been working in fertility for a long time because we sort of get to see that outside look. We've got no skin in the game as to who you go and see, but we sort of know, you know, who might have that sort of just slightly different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is always hope.
Absolutely.
You know, there absolutely is always hope. And it can feel like there's not. And I guess the other thing too is that, you know, if you really have reached the end of that journey and you know, are making peace with it, you know, there are other ways of having children in your life. And that's not saying that that's an easy end or whatever it is. But, you know, you're amazing as you are. You're whole. You're enough. It wasn't your fault. You know, there generally are always other options. But I think really knowing that it's not you, you know, life can just suck sometimes.
You're so right. You're so right. What a nice note to end on. Thank you so much, Belinda. I loved interviewing you. That was such a great topic and really insightful information and tips that you've provided to the audience.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I loved being a part of it. And if you do love the Chew on This podcast, make sure that you give us a review. It goes a long way. And I'll see you in our next episode.